Good morning, everyone. We currently have today Kevin Bailey. He's from Cyber Brilliance, and just as the name states, he's a very brilliant person to add to it. So he's the Vice President of Vice President Strategy of Cyber Brilliance, and also really the go-to-market guy, a specialist in cybersecurity itself. He has over 2 decades of experience with varying companies, Storage Tech, Semantic. Many of us here in the Caribbean are very familiar with Semantic. Quite a bit of products deployed within the Caribbean. He has been instrumental in his research development, especially with IDC, MEA software. He also been active as STEM ambassador, teen tech advisor, and has contributed to the UK government all-party parliament group for blockchain and artificial intelligence. He's also a longtime member of the judging panel for the Mobile World Congress, GLO, MO Award for Mobile Security. He holds a master's in marketing distinction, postgraduate diploma in marketing, and is also a member of the Charter Institute of Marketing. So Kevin, I want to welcome you today as we discuss this issue surrounding ransomware, cybersecurity, and most of all, the Caribbean.
Yes.
So just turn my video on here, and want to give some persons a little bit more time before they log on. I guess we can start in about 1 minute, but I just want to alert all the attendees. We were actually just chatting of a hospital that was affected. I can read the topic. Tampa Hospital says sensitive data, 1.2 million stolen in a failed ransomware attempt. And we were just chatting, how can you have data stolen, but you say there's a failed ransomware attack? So the only objective to that statement, and I forgot to introduce my name, is I'm Edward Millington for CARISAT Global. We tend to get a little bit passionate about some statements like that, so forgive me. How can you have a failed ransomware attack and you have 1.2 million records that were stolen? And the hospital say it was, again, they were successful in a particular sense. And the reason for that statement is that the hospital is not being affected. But in a situation where compliance and other litigation, etc., legal fees and etc., can be extremely high compared to, let's say, a recovery, then that statement would not read that way. It would say that the ransomware was successful. And why was it not successful? Because it did not encrypt the data. So I want to alert everyone that we tend to see ransomware or cyber attack when it truly affects the system. And while here in the Caribbean, while we might be not fully into digital identity, we can have a situation where very soon our loss of digital identity can most probably cause some level of issue. All right, so Kevin, let us get started. It's now 5 minutes past 10 o'clock here in Barbados, and you can go ahead and present your slide.
Lovely. Could you turn on the sharing, please, for me, Edward? Thank you.
Let me go ahead and do that there.
Excellent. And I agree about your last statement, as we were chatting before we came on. Saying it's failed, I think, is a consequence of the intrusion that ransomware now brings to the market, because in effect what they're saying is 5 years ago, when encryption ransomware wasn't so pervasive, people just thought about it as data loss prevention, so the tools to stop data being exfiltrated out. And in those days, and I was around with Semantic, with Vontu and such like, that was an incident. That was a severe incident where, as you say, the legal litigation governance would be impacted. The operation of the business doesn't change, but suddenly you've got lawsuits coming your way.
That is correct.
Because people's data have done. And yeah, if I lost my personal identity in that breach, and that's PHI data they're talking about, I personally am not worried about the millions of records that have gone. I'm worried about mine, so I'm going to personally go in and discuss that with the healthcare organization, with the hospital, and I'm going to bring in the relevant organization that's looking after data privacy. So that is not failed. That executed exactly how the attacker wanted it to happen.
Right.
And that data is now sitting on a nameless site or on a dark website, available to be bought and sold, in the same way you buy things off Amazon nowadays.
Right. That is correct. And as we would have said earlier, if we think about the long-term effects, you can actually go ahead and share your screen. If you think about the long-term effects, the real issue here is, and they haven't been, and there's a study that I have seen personally, where such an incident, how long would it continue to affect their customer? So while we are maybe in a position that we can try to influence change within our organization, or we can be a network administrator, we have to think about ourselves in the sense that if our data was out there and we are suffering from fraud and etc. for about, let's say, for 5 or 10 years, could one say that the breach was successful or not successful? A business may be able to, let's say, litigate, and in this case, get back up and running within, let's say, 1 month, but patients might be in a situation for the next 7, 8, 10 years. Yes. So those are things we have to consider here within the Caribbean when we have a ransomware attack and we have this exfiltration of data, where things do go for us from spam, fraud, even burglaries, etc. So Kevin, go ahead. Please go ahead.
No problem. I always think of an old adage. They always say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, what happens in Jamaica is now out to the world, and everyone's got it. Remember, that attacker wasn't asking for a ransom for that data back. That data's not coming back. And many years ago, and this presentation, I'm doing it very much like I would have when I was running the research for security software at IDC, is that I went to Saudi Aramco after they were hit with the Shamoon virus, and one of the analysts that I met there said, it doesn't matter that they've taken data away because I've got a copy of it. And I said to him, you're not understanding. That copy just allows you to operate. They now have a copy of your data. They can do what they like with. And that's the whole point about this, is that it's down to each of us as individuals and organizations to understand that once that private data, whether it's intellectual property, healthcare, or personal data, is available, then it's available to everybody, which means they're going to abuse your credentials, for their gain, and that's got to be understood.
So in addition to that, like Kevin, just a slight pause. With AI now being able to symbolize your features, your voice, and so forth, there's nothing difficult in terms of the last hack that was in Jamaica, where there was a lot of phishing and so forth. You now have the capability to have the necessary information to want to call to get certain information to change whatever information on you and so forth. So the more data that these criminal organizations have, and I call it affiliated networks, the easier it is now to really affect our lives, so much more easier compared to the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, and it will. We have to accept it. Technology is now embedded in our lives. I have a granddaughter who's nearly 2 years old. They learned to swipe right and swipe left. When I was a child, we had an abacus that we moved little beads. Everyone is technically astute, and we rely on digital technology to run our lives today. And that digital technology relies on data, not only to give us what we want, but protect us from things we don't want to happen to us. So, this isn't about the clouds of doom. This is reality that we all live in today. We're a connected world. And if you think about that, one of the things that Edward and I discussed when we were putting this through was to give you a perspective as an audience about what's really going on out there. I, in my day job, work for a company that offers products, but I'm not doing that today. This is about informing you and making you aware about what's going on around the world in reality and the impact across the Caribbean as well. And also the reality of how people are reacting to these attacks. And one of the things I always say to people when I've been in this industry a long time, as Edward mentioned, is a lot of these systems that you run today need to be dragged into the 21st century. It's no longer good enough to say, but I've got a security posture that works, but have you tested it? Have you seen against reality? And I will give you examples of where I've experienced it with the people I interact with on a daily and weekly basis. And then turning it back to you as our audience, because it's of value to you as citizens, is how would you want your data to be protected if and when the organization that holds your data has been hacked? That's about people power, about individuals. That's how we get things changed through governments, and that's how we should do things through organizations, ensuring that if my data is removed and hacked, do I actually want to do business with that company again? And if it's done through a government or private, public organization, what do I expect them to deal with going forwards? So one of the things Edward and I wanted to ensure is this is a two-way conversation, as much as we can do with Zoom. So we've got a set of questions coming through this. And a lot of these, we're lucky enough to have a poll system to ask these questions. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that in the poll, we've got an understanding from yourself. Have you ever been affected by ransomware? And it's a clear cut, yes or no. And that doesn't mean have you been attacked, it's have you had an incident? And you'll see there's millions of attacks a day, but they don't get through. It's the instance we're looking for within that. Also, what do you think is the #1 cause for successful ransomware attacks that you have there? And all of this is to gain your insight for us so that we can make sure this webinar, which is live, is of value to you. We can continue that through.
So Kevin, I just want to add, and when you do say a ransomware attack, it can be a very situation where there could be a notification from an antivirus, an alert from a system, from a firewall, etc. So it doesn't have to be literally starts to infect, drop malware onto the server or machine and start the encryption. The fact is that in your investigation, you'll have literally said, oh, wow, just escape that. All of that is also included because let's say your colleague, next business, let's say this down the road, who might not be so fortunate, his antivirus might not have updated, for whatever reason, maybe just that machine, and he has a story to tell. So all of this is very important. So we're just going to let you can continue, Kevin. We're going to let the scissors just run for a little bit, and then close it off. Yes, go ahead.
And like I say, throughout this, please ask questions. Even though I'm talking, I'm not good at multitasking. So I'm not a woman. My wife says I can't multitask, so I can't be that good. So Edward will be looking at the comments to make sure that we answer all your questions that you want, because as I say, this is about an inclusive conversation that we want to have. And remember, your answers are not, we don't know who they're coming from. So
that's correct. Very anonymous. That's correct.
yeah, it's totally anonymous on here, but please don't try and answer twice. That is in place. And it's interesting. So the first thing that I see, and as somebody who works in data day in, day out, yeah, there is a 53% of our attendees that have not suffered from a ransomware attack. Excellent. Please be on the lookout, because I'm unfortunately going to guarantee you will join the 44% that have. And like you say, this is something that is regular and moving forwards. The second question that is set out on this is around what you think is the first cause for successful ransomware attacks, i.e. it turns into an incident that people have. And it's really interesting, it's user error. Now, we know that user error can be both what I call the individual that is trying to do good. Yeah, so I call them WIMPs, W-I-M-P. They're well-intentional and meaningful people. They're trying to do good. They're trying to help people out, but by doing that, they breach policies. That's against the insider attacker that is creating that user error. Endpoint network security tools are not maintained. Totally agree with that. And you'll see why as we go through. And investment into cyber security and cyber resilience strategies are either inadequate or incorrectly placed. I agree with it. The one thing that's always been prevalent, even since my IDC days, is cyber security, cyber resilience is always seen as a cost to the business rather than a cost of doing business. And we need to make sure that it's the latter. It's a cost of doing business today. Very much like in the old days, if you go around all of the Caribbean islands and look down a high street, and you will find shutters and padlocks on them to stop somebody getting in, that was a cost of doing business. Today, cybersecurity is where it happens. That's why people don't rob banks anymore. They don't need to. They can go through digitally and manage that. So I'm going to take the poll off from this, and I want to look into some detail about what I know about why do we suffer ransomware in the environments that we live in today. This is a typical topology of what is classed as anti-ransomware technologies that you have. And the key part within all of this is that everyone from a vendor will tell you they are anti-ransomware, and that's what they should be doing. Their job is to stop what's going on. And the key part within this is you have active cybersecurity on the left-hand side and what I classify as reactive data recovery on the right. So how do you suffer from ransomware? Well, it's simple. Something gets through that active cybersecurity, whether it's a managed service provider, a network, an endpoint, network detection, threat intelligence tools, communications. It gets through, it is evaded the malware engines. So think about the products you've got installed. Most of them have 2 to 3 malware engines built into them. And there's a reason for that. It's because different malware engines have different capabilities. It is key to understand that when you have that, all the malware engines that exist out there are never kept up to date. So it is common practice. I worked at Symantec, I've worked at ClearSwift, where we have malware engines and other organizations. You cannot keep them up to date, and they're at different levels. That's why you have multiple malware engines in each product. and in effect, the vendors OEM the products to each other so that they can try to make sure they catch everything. But at any point, there could be a deficiency of up to 30% of known malware vectors that are not included. It's just opportunity that comes through. So when you have this scenario, things will attempt to beat it. It doesn't mean you take it away and say, well, what's the point? You need this in there because of the millions of attacks a day. It's just the 1% that gets through. And that's the one we have to worry about. When you also look at it, and this is my stance, data recovery in any aspect does not stop you from suffering from ransomware. It is a rebuild function. So when somebody and I used to have Veritas under my portfolio when I was at Symantec, whether it's Veeam, Veritas, Commvault, and they say we have anti-ransomware technology, they don't. They have a technology that stops the ransomware from affecting your backup copies. The attack has happened and it's turned into an incident. What they do is stop the attacker from compromising that data that you need to use to recover the data. So, are you prepared for ransomware? And this is another one of our poll questions that we want out there is think about each of these questions and have you done a ransomware assessment? So have you done this within the last 6 months, last year, or not at all? Think about what your ransomware assessment is. How do you test against it? Do you just test functionality of the products that you got? Do you do red teaming and blue teaming or purple teaming within that? Do you use an outside resource? It's all of these things that you need to understand that says when somebody, and I speak to on a regular basis every week, are you prepared for ransomware? And they go, yes, we are. And I say, how much testing have you done? Then comes the answer. And then I say to them, how much of that is reality testing? And in most of those cases, people will come back to us and say, well, it's the best that we can do. And as we can see from the results that we have here, and by the way, this isn't a shaming and naming type of situation. This is reality. You haven't done any, even within a year or 6 months. And it could be because work pressures are in the way. You've got enough to do. There's not enough people to help you with that. And the business operation takes priority over testing the scenarios that you need to undertake. So this is the same type of information that I'd expect to see wherever in the world it is. So if we look at that, and I now will show you the next slide, this is why, in effect, what happens to an environment is that the amount of industries that are getting affected every day by ransomware and cybersecurity attacks means that it's not targeted. Everyone is targeted. When somebody says, oh, we're targeting healthcare, we're targeting governments, we're targeting manufacturing. No, it's not. It is everybody. Think about the mindset of a cyber attacker. They're after getting maximum gain from minimal effort. So what they will do is they will create a set of attack vectors and go over whoever is available on their radar. This set of results is literally a couple of months old. This is from Sophos. And I picked this because it's the most context-aware set of results I've seen for a long time around organizations who have been hit by ransomware. That means they've incurred an incident. And as you can see, everything from the right of IT technology and telecoms vendors is 50%, all the way up to the lower education on the left-hand side. So yeah, when you look at that and you sit and think, wait there, am I in an industry that's been attacked? And you're thinking, well, it has been, but I haven't. I then wanted to look at this and think, wait a minute, what is actually happening in the Caribbean? And yeah, first of all, yeah, unfortunately, like most analysts, yeah, you're getting prior data. So we know that there were over 144 million cyber attacks in the Caribbean the first half of last year. Great. That means nothing to me. And the reason it means nothing is that those cybersecurity tools you've got in place are stopping those coming in. Being attacked is different than suffering from an incident. The key part on that is that this is happening on a regular basis. So those that say, I haven't been attacked yet, doesn't mean you've incurred an incident, doesn't mean that you're not being attacked. You are every single day. Now, if you look at it and you sit and think over the last 12 months, I found these examples in about 20 minutes. I sat and thought, right, give me a last year's view of some of the top attacks that we've seen across the Caribbean. Now, in between every single one of these, I could probably add another 10 that is there. So you look across it and you start saying, wait there, the graph on the left is real, because all countries and areas across the Caribbean are being attacked. And every industry is being attacked. Yes, we have a lot of activity going on within the government sector, private sector. We've all heard about the move it transfer activity. You know, that's like SolarWinds. Yeah, that attacker or organized criminal group in that case was looking for the maximum return by investing a lot of time into compromising the move it transfer technology. But, you know, no one's excluded. Jamaica Eye was attacked in June. And people sit and think, why would you attack me? Yeah, so whether you're a small organization or whether you're a corporate, your eyes need to make sure that if you're not on the list, don't put me on the list in the future, because you probably will be there at some point. And that's why it's essential for everybody that you maintain that highest level of cybersecurity that you can. So, we've done this question, and people always say, no, I've not, but I know a friend who has. And you say, actually, it really means you, but you're not going to tell me about this. So what I want to do on this one, and the poll is up on this, do you believe you have a solid, matured cybersecurity program? So remember, matured is like a graph of saying, I'm building my cybersecurity maturity over time. It's like somebody saying, I've got zero trust methodology in place. Well, zero trust is something that is earned over time by putting policies, process, and design concepts in place. That's how you do it. And also, have you ever carried out a comprehensive AI-driven integrated risk assessment and compliance service? So from this, have you looked at external people to help you? Because I know in most environments that that type of capability does not exist wholly in one organization, because you have your existing roles to manage. There may be a head of department, but you engage external third parties to help you out with this. And there's,
Kevin,
yes,
I have someone asking a quick question while you're going through that there. How do you automate a cyber assessment? And I just want to chat a little bit, because we do quite a few of those there.
right.
The assessment, there are many variants of it. Some companies would answer a number of questions. It could be an Excel spreadsheet or so forth. What CareSec Global provides to you is through a portal environment, a SaaS solution, which not only you're given a range of questions, but we can also measure risk within your Active Directory infrastructure endpoint. And by pulling all this information together and based on the what is really going on, the current risks within that particular month or particular period of time, you're using a range of machine learning algorithms to highlight which questions can be a little bit more important than next. And after the questionnaire is completed, to perform an assessment where what policy you need to implement, where your priorities should be, etc. A priority last month is not, most probably might not be a priority this month, or a growing trend could be very high priority in the next month or so forth. So the ability to take the data, again, all these things, all this data analytics, take this information and be able to come up with what is your next task is, the time frames to get it completed, who you're going to assign them to, and etc. It's going to be very key. The more you mature your program, the more it's involved. You're involving a lot of advanced techniques, etc., advisory, etc. So maturity is, if you want to call it in terms of levels, the higher you go, the more that you build the cyber resilience within your organization itself. You're more looking at it from a risk point of view. That's what it really is. It's more looking at your business, a more risk point of view, where you can direct what available resources you have in keeping your environment safe as much as possible. You can go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, no, and it's good. And I think the thing that we're trying to explore within each of the quantitative and qualitative data points is that you are preparing yourself going forwards. And preparing means that you have an understanding, and one of the key things is you need to allocate budget to do this. In one of the first questions about that we were asking about cybersecurity and resilience capability is looking, do people think about this in their budget cycles? And that's, you've got to be forward thinking on this. Even though it's happening today, it's better to react and prepare for the future than just accept that, well, I'm not going to get any budget, I can't change things, so I'm not going to factor that in and go and deal with it. So all of these are really key and efficient, and all of the answers to these poll questions will be shared back to you so that you can understand that. And what's really clear in all of this is that the question 3 that looks at your planning to carry out these maturity assessments, is looking very positive, and that's the sort of thing that we want for the region, because you are such a close-knit set of islands and communities that it works very much like the same that I have here. I'm based in London in the UK, and we have certain groups of countries like the Nordics. When one country does something, another country follows, and they lead by example, and they work with each other. So that's the sort of thing that we need to make sure that we continue to exploit where it is, and make sure that everybody can make use of each other's capabilities and specialisms. Now, one of the things that always happens, and I always get from people is, well, it's not happened to me, so it's not my problem until I get hit. So what we wanted to do was look at, in effect, parallel environments that happen and will affect you as an individual. And one of the things with that is that we say to people, it's always everyone's problem. Even if it's not direct, indirectly, we have to deal with it. Now, your region is heavily contributed in GDP from tourism. I've been to Jamaica. I'm lucky one of those that have come there, and I want to visit other islands. But, and you look at the size of GDP that tourism contributes to each of those countries that we've listed. If you think about tourism, and we're talking about domestic, inbound and outbound, so all of you guys going to different islands, people coming in like myself, so I'm coming in to visit the Caribbean, and also people from the Caribbean going out. Now, if you work in a shop, in a hospital, yeah, and you hear about certain areas being hit by ransomware, you would think, well, that's great, it's not hit me. But it could, because the key thing around this means that once it's attacked, it's not operational. So how do you get around airports? How do you get through customs? Air traffic control means you can't take off. The airlines themselves can't operate. You can't get a passport. The food supply chain, you know, we might not all like aeroplane food, but we do want something when we get on an aeroplane. And then we want a hotel. We want to hire a car or a bike, and we want to make phone calls, and we need to book them. Any of those get hit, it's your problem now, because you've either booked or you cannot book something for it to happen. So when people look at the industry and say, well, wait a minute, it's not my issue, it is, because it will subjectively hit you as part of the activity that you want to do. So, yeah, when you look at that and you look at the Caribbean, if somebody is now attacking the Caribbean more, and we're seeing more and more attacks as we've shown before, suddenly the Caribbean doesn't look attractive anymore because there are issues. That means you're not accessible to the outside community. So all of these parts are the sum that make the whole that we have to deal with. So the next set of questions I'd like you to answer is around data resilience. And one of the things that I always talk about every day, because it's part of my other role, is about backups. So do you verify your backups? So many people tell me I have backups. So we say, do you verify them? Do you know if you're backing up the advisory who could be in your network? So is there somebody or something in your system that you are backing up that is in your network you may not know about or you do know about? And then what data has been exfiltrated by ransomware attack, and do you know what data has been stolen? So this is looking at when somebody says, a bit like the example Edward gave right at the beginning, you know, the hospital says we had a failed attack, but you didn't because data was exfiltrated. Right. What data was exfiltrated? Do you know every piece of unstructured, semi-structured and structured data that was resident in your environment and where it was, who was using it, how it was being used before that incident occurred? Standard management. It's like saying to you, do you know where all of your money is in your wallet, your purse, your bank, you know, in your savings? You would pay attention to that. So do you understand all of this? And I give you an anecdote of this, which is a vice president of data security who worked at the time for JP Morgan Chase said, I understand 15% of the data that I operate with. The other 85%, I don't know where it is, who's sharing it, and what happens to it on a regular basis. So, yeah, that's somebody from a very senior bank at the time. He's not there anymore. But do you understand this, and can you manage it? So, and the backups is key, that you understand, verify. You may actually think, although don't answer it in the question, is the backup clean? Not verified, i.e. I've got all the bits and bytes. Many years ago, I used to work for a company called Storage Tech that built the first robotic tape storage units. So bits and bytes and loss data, I understand. So could you guarantee not only you've got all the data, but it is clean from malware is a different conversation. So we've seen straight away that there's a 50-50 split that they are verified and not verified. We don't know, as a majority, whether I'm backing up an advisory that could be in the network. And the data classification side of things, do I understand all my data that is there? The spread of that, I understand, and that is what I expect, especially the last one. I do not know at all, 47%. So let's round it to 50. That is the thing that if I said to somebody, could I walk into your environment now and push a button and see everything that you've got? Acknowledging that I have the authorization because I'm going to look at PII and PHI data, but I know where all the data is, who's using it, what applications, and where it's moved from its full life cycle. So, having all of this type of information is key. A data classification tool is good because it classifies it. A lot of the data classification tools don't monitor its life cycle throughout all of its processes that exist there. It's great because it classifies it, but you want to understand the life cycle. Has this person sent it out and they shouldn't have? Have they sent it out and it was permissible? So those are the sort of things. We go back to the first example of data loss prevention. That's where the old DLP event-based activity. What this is driving is a data-based activity. When the data moves, I want to know about it, rather than when an event happens, I now want that to be impacted from what they deal with. And the reason we ask that is that people say to me, we don't pay criminals. And I say to them, really, you don't? No, because there is a, let's call it a advisory from the US government, from the EU governments and US. I don't know what the governments in the Caribbean's advisory is, but it is, you do not pay criminals. And what it works out in the end, when you actually see it, is, yes, we do. Why? Because you're worried about your business. You want to bring your business up. And this is another report from that same Sophos report. And the top set of numbers says, yes, we paid the ransom and got the data back. This is all the different countries that did that. Or, yes, we use backups to restore the data. So you have a mixture, and that's why the numbers will not add up to 100, because in some cases they get the data back, but they can't recover with it, but they were told they got it back. But do you know if you got all of it back or just a copy of it back and it's still sitting on the dark web? So it shows that business priorities are a greater essential than a government advisory. I want to get my business back up and operating. I've experienced with an organization that I'm working with, where the first thing that happens when you get ransomware attacked is you take your networks down. The next thing that happens is you have a whole posse of legal people walk in. They are the people that then direct the show and say, this is what happens. So you want to make sure that you can be as efficient as possible and manage that environment. But using those backups is an essential part in the current methodology that is in place. So we know, yes.
I just want to highlight something here that to the previous slide. In all our attributes of protecting one's data, we only understand where our data normally would be, or how it's being used, or if it's being lost, or if we don't even have a grips on it. It's during an incident. And this is where at some point in time you want to find out or understand what data has been compromised and what has been exfiltrated. And in some instances, many companies will turn to a firewall administrator or business to clean that information for the firewalls, if not antivirus or some form of Windows solutions. So this is just a little tidbit to say, after this particular webinar, it is time to look at those processes to determine tomorrow you have an event, or let's say later, can you determine what has happened? It may be time to look at all the necessary processes to mature them or to advance them to be able to track these types of incidences. You can proceed now, Kevin.
No, and I totally agree with that. And if you think about that and the activities you will undergo, this statement, it costs 10 times the amount of the ransomware to actually recover from that incident is so true. And you must be able to understand what is the value of your data when it is exfiltrated, because then you'll have an understand of the impact that that data has on your business, on your customers and employees, but also the value that the attacker sees in that data as well, that you must put into place. We know from the report that I've taken a lot of my data from to keep it consistent. The Caribbean and Latin America has paid out over 124 million US dollars in the first half of 22 in ransomware. So, your activity is no different to the rest of the world. You do it because you want to maintain that operational capability. Now, paying it is one thing, or waiting and saying, wait there, we're going to keep the attackers away from us. What I'm interested in this, if you were compromised as an organization, do you have a recovery time objective as part of your standard operating procedures that you've got in place there to minimize operational disruption for RTO? And this is really, really key. Remembering, right at the beginning, we said digital runs our lives. Without digital, we all stop. There's very few things that operate nowadays that are analog. We may write things on paper, but it gets digitized at some point that you put into place. So, what we want to push through these questions is, do you believe your data recovery program is meeting today's cyber threats? Is it good enough for you today? And how long does it take to recover a system or a server that you obviously have there? Now, the key part on this is looking, if you look at a server and then look at the data, which is slightly different, and I'll give you an answer after it that relates to that. But the RTO time is key within all of this. The last question is a key one. What do you do next to recover your data and devices after the ransomware has attacked your critical service PCs, on-site backups, Active Directory, and you've taken your networks down? This isn't hypothetical. I've seen this being done against one of my existing customers that I talk to. This is regular now. And that doesn't just include Active Directory, DNS servers and stuff. That also includes things like voice over IP systems, 3CX systems. They're there to cripple you. That's their intent, and they're there to hold you to ransom. So none of these questions are things that are hypothetical and never happen. This is real, and we've seen this before. So it's great to see, like I say, the answers are coming in from this. It doesn't surprise me that people are saying that they don't believe that their current data recovery program is adequate for today's cyber threats. We also have to understand things evolve. So it could be that maybe it is, and I'm trying to work towards that. That's great. But you've got to deal with that. And to recover a system, less than 3 hours, greater than 3 hours. I can tell you that to recover a terabyte of data onto that server, the terabyte alone would take you 2.5 hours, because we tested it. And remembering, in most of these environments that you're doing it, it's using whatever backup software that you choose. They're all the same in the function. They're also all dependent on network connectivity, speed of actuators, speed of the network, and the receiving server as well. So also from this, do you have a recovery time objective to minimize operational disruption? I applaud you, because I like the 1 day RTO, less than 7 days RTO, and less than 2 weeks RTO. Yeah, that is there. The month, maybe the person that's being realistic on this is, what we've not done is said how much of your operational system is disrupted, because obviously that is time bound within itself, that you put into place. So, and then the final ones, it's really good. Yeah, and I love these questions, because it comes back to the first question, on question 4. We use our cloud backups. We use immutable tape backups. We deploy to a disaster recovery site. It's great. The NIST policy for backups is the 3-2-1, which is, yeah, 1 on site, 1 off site, and 1 on an immutable stroke tape or air gap system should always be in place. And those are really great answers. The interesting part, and I'll come to this now, for
Kevin,
yes,
we have a question here, which I think,
yeah, sure.
you can determine if you want to take it, state it later. What would you say are the top 3 elements to being operational resilient? What are, right, yes. So what are the top 3 elements to being operational resilient?
Data, devices, and people. So you can't be operationally resilient without your data. You cannot be resilient without the devices are active, and devices can be everything from a web server to my PC. You know, people forget about the people at the end of this who walk around with a PC and suddenly you've been attacked and I can't use my laptop anymore. I'm the person that goes and gets the money for you and sells the goods. And the last one is the people themselves. You need skilled people for operational resilience. Says if it's running well, great. When it isn't, I need an incident response team, people that know how to do this and bring it back efficiently. And the reason that last one is so key is they are the people that advise the board. How should you respond to this? They are the people that will say yes to the lawyers. I can now bring these systems up because it's now clean. They're the people that turns around to the operational people, i.e. in the other business units, saying you are now active again on the system. So it's, you can't do anything with data, which is a bit like software. Without hardware, software just floats in the ether. Data by itself is no good. You need the devices. So bring all the devices up. Then you need the people. Everything else to it is extraneous to it. If I can see your website, as far as I'm concerned, you're active. That's great. That's my window in. If I can talk to somebody, that's what it does. That's devices and data. So these things are working together.
I think that's a very good answer. There's so many twists to it. It can be the one at the governance level that you actually give. You give that overall shadow to or light to this type of problem. Then there, if you know, working with network administrators and so forth, who somewhat is, you know, responsible. Another twist that you can see, you need to identify threats.
Yeah.
Just in case of that threat or that incident starts to occur, you must be able to get rid of it or mitigate it as quick as possible. So let's say you're not able to do some level of encryption, but it does not span the organization. The next element is being able to replace that data as quick as possible. And in an event, let's say that you are at that stage, you need to be able to recover as quick as possible, along with the utilization of tools within the environment to make sure it does not happen again. So one is being able to identify an original threat that occurred from before, and then number two, to be able to reduce. So because if it's a implementation of a new EDR solution, et cetera, the idea is to minimize reaching to that point where you're going to be down for extended period of time. So the idea of being resilient is to be back up, or as Kevin would have mentioned, or as we all would mention, the RTO is very low as much as possible. And that can only happen when you start to enhance or mature that environment.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin?
I think if you think about it as a business, and I put this up slide before, do not get overawed with the fact that on the cybersecurity side, the things that Edward mentioned there, to be operational resilience means you need as many of these things as possible. It doesn't matter because you think, wait, or I'm a small company. You have managed security service providers that provide this for you. They will give you all of that in a package to enable you to be cyber resilient as well as operationally resilient as well. So the capability exists there. You can take parts of it. You could do your own endpoint detection, network detection technologies, and get the rest of it from a service provider. So there, yeah, it's that intermix that works best for your organization to put it in, because if you don't experience that, unfortunately, what happens is that when somebody says, I can recover immediately with backups, we then experience this trend, which is it's taken, on this survey alone, 5% of the people that use backups to restore the data. So we're not talking about people who paid and then got the data back again. It is the 5% that were in place here. And by the way, this survey is 3,000 people that was on there. They got it back in a day. Excellent. That's what you want, real efficiency. But the trend sits at this way. So, you look at it and saying up to a week, that's 7 days. Up to a month, 30 days. Up to 3 months, 90 days. Up to 6 months, you're looking on 180 days. I know from one customer that I'm working with, a contact I'm working with, it took him 7.5 weeks to bring his systems back. That's roughly 300 servers of data that it took him to get it back in. The interesting part is there is a piece here on this last sentence that says the recovery advantages of backups are clear. Well, I couldn't see them because in effect, when somebody says I can recover immediately with backups, the only people on this graph that recovered immediately were the 5%. Everybody else didn't recover immediately. They started to, and then it took time. And that time costs money. If you think that on the chart alone, 36.5%, which is the mean across this, accepted a recovery time objective of less than 7 days. But 58% had to accept an RTO of 6 months, anything up to that. Now, when you look at that, the average cost per downtime per minute is $5,000. So like the previous chart said, it costs 10 times the amount of the ransomware in your activity to recover. That is roughly around $61,000 a day. Now, if you're having problems getting budget for cybersecurity and resilience, how easy is it going to get hold of 61,000 times by the number of days that you're down? Because this is not only lost revenue, but it is also costed revenue, i.e. for you to put back things in place. So when you look at it, you sit and think, is this acceptable for my business? Because this is reality, that graph. That's people that have said, this is what's going on. This is a quantitative and qualitative exercise that Sophos went through. So they got the data behind this to pull it all together.
Kevin, I want to mention something here that why there's an extension of the peers that are highlighted here. Most of the time when some level of research is done, they're really looking at maybe getting some level of operation back into place. What many administrators or even managers and directors may not always recognize is that when you come, if you, let's say that you have a server and that server is complete image, that's wonderful. You can replace the image.
Yeah.
But let's say that you only backed up the data. And forgive me for smiling, because when you think about the rolling effects, you understand, yes, it can be, you have to smile. In my field, when there are problems, you have to smile because that keeps you going, that keeps stress down. So you have a situation, you have to now reinstall the operating systems. And in many cases, sometimes you're unable to find, let's say that you're in an industry where you're running some OT devices, etc., or special software, maybe that whole application that is being run. And it's always run. No one ever stopped, maybe Windows 7, maybe Windows 2000, whatever it is. And now you have a situation where someone said, you know what, your operating system have been erased, you need to upgrade. So let's say you go to Windows 10, Windows 11, Server 2019, whatever it is. Then you have to load back on the software and you realize the software doesn't work. You might have to go and purchase new software, which is not viable because it might be very expensive. You don't have to set back up. You may now need to export that data. So all of these things are many times not taken into the process of what your real true RTO would be. So when you hear companies saying that they're still recovering from an incident 2 and 3, sometimes 5, 8 years afterwards, it is because there were a situation where legacy equipment were being run or legacy software, but in the need to up to date, you have a situation where those pieces of software, even some of the data, you might not be able to recover in a more effective manner, because now you have to pay maybe a programmer or a developer to now export that data in a meaningful manner that it can be imported into another database. So all those things have to be taken into consideration. It's not only saving that data, but it's the state of the system, which include the operating system, the software, etc.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at that. And I know from one of the poll questions before, there was a section there saying I have cloud backups. Yeah, I recover from that. How are you going to recover back when your networks are down? Because that's the first thing you take down when you get attacked. So you've got no outside contact, you've got no internal contact going on, which means if, as we set in one of the other questions, you've lost your backup copies, your Active Directory, DNS, whatever, how are you going to get your data back apart from asking your friend to go to a local warehouse, pick up the tapes and bring them back physically? Because you're not going to get them through a network connection, because your lawyer will not allow you to put that network down until they are happy that your people are confident that that malware is no longer active in your environment that you have there. And I think it is key. And yeah, you look at technology and bringing things into the 21st century is key. I can tell you, everybody on this, that I know of technology that says, actually, those people in that 5% are the people I like less than a day. Why? Because I can guarantee I can bring all your data back, no matter how much of it is, and no matter how many servers it is, in a couple of hours. full stop. That's what innovation in the tech space does, but people have got to be made aware of it. So accepting that when the backup providers who provide all this RTO and RPO activity, the key part within all of this is they are always dependent on the constraints that have always been there for a decade. They are moving data from one point to another via a network connection or a local area network connection, and they have to make sure the data they're bringing back has been verified, it's clean, it's in place. There is better ways to do that today. And yeah, it doesn't remove the need for backups because they're always there for disaster recovery, hardware failures, but we're talking about an active environment where that cost time that you have that is in place suddenly says, wait a minute, I can considerably reduce this, but I know I'm in control of my recovery and operational resilience. So
differently,
yeah,
differently, Kevin.
Yeah.
What Kevin's really saying, I think no translation is really needed here because we're actually close around the time. What he's saying is, no, an incident happened today. There's always going to be a responsibility is the actor in your environment, because you could be with today's new technique, you can recover in a matter of seconds depending on how fast the devices are. So let's say that you have a server, 1 terabyte, you can recover, let's say, in 10 seconds.
Yep.
Is the adversary still in the environment? So here's the thought process. You need tools to identify the adversary in your environment. You can utilize whatever connections you need to acquire those tools. And as soon as you can verify that those tools are readily available to you, by a click of a button, your server can be back to normal, or your whole infrastructure can be back to normal, depends on where you want to go.
Yep.
And you can verify those systems with the new existing tools to make sure that all is well before they then go back onto the network. In other words, you minimize from wiping that machine to reinstall, and we all know that that's how always go well. You can reduce that recovery process to a matter of just a few minutes. Some endpoints, it could be a matter of, again, a few minutes or less. Verify that machine, take it off, and move forward. Just as easy as that. In other words, you can find that you can bring your system back into operation as much very quickly. You know, looking at firewalls, looking at whatever the process would be, but again, you have advanced and mature that environment. Go ahead, Kevin, because I know we got have a few more slides left.
No problem. So we had the answer about the cloud backups and the immutable earlier on. So I think, and this is the point where I'd like people to ask questions. I don't know if the facility exists for you to talk, and please talk. You know,
You can raise your hand.
Yeah, Edward and I are nice people. We don't bite or anything like that. And I yeah, if it means I can come and stay with you in the Caribbean, then all well and good. But what I'd like to know, to understand, if it was your data that's being exposed, how would you expect the hacked organization to ensure your data is secure? What would you like to understand from those organizations to put your mind at rest and to understand that?
I have a question here by a gentleman. Okay, I want to call his name, but a person. I have heard that 60% of small to medium-sized businesses hit by a breach are out of business within 6 months. Is this accurate?
No.
I doubt it.
Yeah, it's nice architecture. What I can tell you, and this is the difference between, think about a decade ago when somebody talked about size of businesses, and what you did in those days is you said, if I've got 100 employees, then I've got 100 employees type of data that I'm dealing with. If I've got 2 employees, I'm a micro business, a Soho business type of environment, then I'm not going to have much data because I can't interact much. That has gone out the wall. That is wrong. and I do it in market research regularly. Small companies exist, and I won't call them SMEs, because in different parts of the world, again, people term SMEs as anyone between 250 employees and below, but 250 employees can also have $50 million of revenue. So it's different ways that you can cut things. There is lots of evidence out there that smaller organizations who are not security resilient will close their business because they'll lose their data, which is their lifeblood, and they can't operate, so they can't have their websites up, because the vast majority of these are pay and click type of organizations, will go out of business. But it is not 50% within 6 months. I can tell you that. It is probably, as an average, somewhere around 10 to 15%. And they struggle. The remainder is about, what do I need to recover from this environment? Because I'm being attacked as a 10-person organization because I have a lot of data, and that is really, really valuable to all my customers, all my partners, my supply chain, and they've got hold of it, and they're now using that, which means customers are going to go away from me. If I'm inability to work, i.e. my systems have been taken down, I am bringing no revenue in. So that's where these sort of things come into place. But it is not 50% or 60%. It's a lower number, but it is a catastrophic number, because enterprise organizations, those greater than 250 employees and above, or greater than $50 million and above, are people that can sustain that type of impact because they have money in the bank behind them. They have backers that will help them get through that, whereas the smaller businesses don't.
I don't have any further questions, so I guess we can proceed, and then we can highlight, what are the things, some of the things that can really help a small business, right up to the top.
Yeah, and I think for doing that, and I appreciate, some of this stuff, you may have thought you've heard before, but what Edward and I wanted to do is bring reality of the things from reports that are true. They're factual, so they're evidential, where you could drill back to them and say, that's the person we spoke to who had this issue, and this is the reality of trying to recover in this environment. What we have to accept, and that's all of us, Edward, myself, everybody on this call, is ransomware is real, and it will affect everyone at any time. The current version of ransomware is this encryption, deletion, stuff like that, but it will change. But people will hold you to ransom. Why? Because they're trying to extort money from you. It is not somebody else's problem. It's all of ours, because it affects us not only directly if our organization is hit, but indirectly if a service we are procuring from or we offer to has been affected. You need to test real life scenarios, not product functionality. I'm told day in, day out, and a lot of CISOs, I sit on CISO WhatsApp groups that say, we've got to go through a proper tabletop exercise. Do not test the product that they work. If they didn't work, you wouldn't have brought them in the first place. What you're testing is the events and scenarios that you would go through for different types of experiences, whether that's ransomware, data loss, DDoS attacks, things like this. You need to go and test those, that you're resilient for it. And that's where third-party experts and specialists come in to help you. Everyone uses that. You don't put your own people in to do that. It's too expensive. Use third parties to do that. And again, unless you know all about your data, and I mean all of it, you won't know what the effective, if it's exfiltrated, and what the effective on your organization, your customers, your employees, the citizens, as well as the value that the attacker has for it, because they've seen it. They've been in your organization probably for a week, sitting, running around, going polymorphic so you can't find them, and they're looking at stuff to see where it is. They're seeing what's password protected, what's not, what other types of policies you've got in place to stop them. And when they get it, it's a bit like a watering hole attack. They see a stream of data going, that's what I want. I now take that and I'm taking it out. And the final one is, please accept, no one in the world today can exist without online systems. We do everything through it. I have children, and if I took their phone away from them, I think my life is not worth living. If I took their PCs away from them, they can't do no work. Yeah, unless you are a laborer, where you are physically using your hands, and we should have more people like that, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, then you're reliant on technology. And by the way, the labourer's reliant on the manager who's told him how to build, for instance, a house, where to put it, because it's all on CAD drawings and stuff. So, yeah, you should look at things to change this. And what I'd invite you to do, and this is something that Edward has set up, and we are lucky at Cyberilliance to be a contributing partner to him, is the coffee break series. So our job is to give you answers to the questions, not to talk about them again. That's what this is. This was an informed session. The next session is about how are the answers that we can give you resolve and mitigate some of those issues that you've seen that are active, so that I no longer can accept of waiting until I get affected, but I can take a preemptive view on this and actually drive that forward. And like with everything, if you have a burning requirement, you don't have to wait for any of these. Edward's here. He's the other guy that you can see. And, he knows your region and your area better than I ever would. But he's got access to all of us that can ensure that if you have a current requirement and you want to address it, or just discuss about everything that we've gone through and how you can mitigate each of those areas to make sure that you are prepared properly, reach out to him. That's what he's there for. Edward, I'll pass over to
you. Yes, the current session that's currently looking at, especially when it comes to backup and recovery, and we have meeting data protection requirements, which is very important, because while we can recover, and some of us may not be involved in it, is also the legal attribute or the legal component when it comes to a security incident, especially when data is exfiltrated. You want to know what data is lost, what has been accessed or changed. For those who are running OT networks and so forth, are you into manufacturing, you want to make sure that the information, let's say that your processes are still trusted, how to make that pepper sauce, how to add, let's say, how much chlorine to water. You have those type of situations. If systems are corrupted, you have to re-verify those systems to verify if the output or the product is at the point where it's supposed to be at, to remain in a competitive mode. So the coffee break series, as we have looked to design and create, is to highlight different very, very key aspects when it comes to cybersecurity. We have a number of speakers. Unfortunately, this one we had to do was very free, because it was very important to see and to deliver information into the Caribbean where there is a sense of urgency when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to ransomware attack, when it comes to data being exfiltrated. The whole Caribbean is going through a digital identity implementation. Digital wallets, we have been hearing a lot of talks on digital wallets. So losing your identity or having someone obtain information on you and being able to use that information against yourself or another party. Maybe you can get up tomorrow morning and heard you called the bank yesterday to change this information, to wire this amount, et cetera, like what happens to some of our family or friends in first world countries like America and Europe and so forth. And it would be very sad to see that we do not treat our data with respect. Data regulations are being empowered now. So there's a situation that you will have to report these incidences. So what we want to do, or what we did in the session, is to highlight that your data is very important. Treating it with respect in terms of keeping it out of person's hands are going to be very important. And in an event that we all sit at all businesses, at some point you will be breached, is what information is lost, know where that has gone, and how we can put in the necessary steps. So I would say, let us not wait to that particular point. Let us start with that process in building data resilience, which really in essence involve cyber resilience. And the reason for that there is that it involves, if you think about onion, you talk about defense in depth. You think about zero trust, you don't trust anything. So again, I would like to thank Kevin for being able to deliver such a wonderful message. We try to keep it not so technical, but just present information on you, because information to you, but we want to, within the next couple of weeks or so forth, to be able to dive deeper into what those backup processes look like and how you can actually enhance your data protection program. So again, Kevin, I don't know if there are any further questions, but we want to say thank you very much for taking the time to, upgrade your busy schedule, and we look forward to share any further information to you as it so arises. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much indeed as well. And it's good to be back on. It's been a while since we were last on at the beginning of the year. So
yes. And I think that event, from some of the communication that has been given to us, and we know that cybersecurity is not anything cheap. It involves just continuing rolling budgets, because as soon as you implement a particular program, you can almost guarantee it is outdated. I mean, it's just a matter of fact. You can have your firewalls, which cybersecurity is not about technology in general sense, but let's say like firewalls, you have to keep those licenses up to date. You have to make sure firewalls are doing more. Your DLP solution, is it operating like 10 years ago? It has to be different right now. Are you implementing things and not understanding the risk of the business? Again, the key importance, performing an integrated cybersecurity and IT risk and compliance service assessment. All those things are very important to where you can put stuff. For a small business, and we were supposed to highlight that, for small business, yes, you might have some level of email security, funds are very difficult. We will always say, you know what? Having a very low-cost EDR solution is very helpful, and we utilize products like New Shield, which allow you to recover, stop ransomware, protect the boot set that someone did ask earlier. Yes, you can protect the boot sets there so that you can get your machine back up and running. You can replace those files in a matter of seconds, literally. It doesn't eat up your storage on your device. So what we are looking at is to also have your files also encrypted. You're using files that are already encrypted that you don't even know, because we deploy tools like ActiveFile. So these are the type of discussions that we will have in the next 2 series that are coming up. So look forward to seeing them. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending.